Welcome back to the Explainer, everyone. Okay, so today we're diving into something really fascinating and honestly, a bit unsettling. We're going to completely unpack the hidden architecture of control, manipulation, and abuse by looking at the incredible work of Dr. Sam Vaknin. Trust me, once you see the psychological blueprints we're about to explore, it's absolutely going to change how you look at the group dynamics around you.
So think about this for a second. What do a toxic family and a dangerous headline-making cult actually have in common? I mean, on the surface, they seem totally different, right? You've got a private domestic unit on one hand and a massive societal fringe group on the other. But here is the absolute mind-blowing truth we're uncovering today. The psychological mechanisms running a destructive cult, they are literally identical to the ones running a dysfunctional family. It's the exact same blueprint.
All right, here's our psychological roadmap for today. We'll start with the religion of narcissism, then move to the mentally ill family, look at weaponizing the children, explore the spiritual narcissist, and finally, wrap up with breaking the toxic cycle.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the religion of narcissism, the Church of One.
To really grasp this kind of systemic abuse, we have to look inside the abuser's mind. Pathological narcissism, it's not just everyday vanity. It's actually a private religion formed way back in early childhood. Imagine a child going through severe trauma or being completely objectified to fulfill a parent's dreams. To survive that, they create a psychological defense. They literally invent a god inside their own mind, this omnipotent, perfect, false self. And to appease this newly invented internal deity, the child essentially sacrifices their own true, authentic self. They become a church of one.
I really want this quote from Dr. Vaknin to sink in. Pathological narcissism is a private religion. It demands human sacrifice. Think about the gravity of that. Because the abusers sacrificed their own true self to this false idol when they were young, they view every human relationship through that exact same lens. Since they sacrifice themselves, they will absolutely demand that you sacrifice yourself to them too. They want you to surrender your autonomy and just merge with their false self.
Moving right along to Section 2, the mentally ill family, a multicellular organism.
So, how does this one individual's pathology infect a whole group? Well, when a narcissist runs a household, they literally create a mentally ill family. Now, the source material actually lists 13 signs of this, but we've boiled it down to the 7 most crucial ones for you. And as we go through these, notice how it sounds exactly like a cult. The family functions as this enmeshed single organism. Individuality is just not allowed. They obsess over outward appearances rather than actual reality, and they enforce these strict, delusional narratives that demand absolute loyalty. Then there are the hidden texts, these unspoken rules where you basically have to mind-read the abuser just to avoid getting punished. And of course, they completely normalize severe boundary breaches. Personal privacy, autonomy, totally erased.
You can really see the stark contrast here between a healthy family and a toxic one. A healthy family is like a safe launch pad, right? It encourages you to be yourself and safely interact with the outside world. But a mentally ill family, it's a prison. It is rigid, paranoid, and honestly xenophobic. It demands complete enmeshment and forces its members to live entirely divorced from present reality, usually by obsessing over past grievances or some manic, unrealistic future fantasy.
Which brings us to Section 3, weaponizing the children, the collateral damage.
Now we have to talk about the most vulnerable victims in this microcult, the kids. And honestly, it is horrifying how systematically abusers objectify their own offspring. Depending on the child's age and the abuser's specific brand of pathology, a child gets slotted into one of 4 categories. 1. Competition. Just a rival for attention and resources. 2. A nuisance. Basically an annoying obligation that ties them down. 3. Supply. An extension of the abuser whose only job is to provide adulation. Or 4, and this is definitely the most terrifying, a weapon. A psychopathic parent will deliberately program their child like a guided missile, aimed entirely at destroying an ex-partner.
So how do they actually weaponize a child? They hijack a psychological defense mechanism called splitting. When a child's world is falling apart, like during a really bitter divorce, the trauma is just too much for their brain to handle. To survive the chaos, they split the world into absolutes, right? Black and white. One parent becomes the flawless, victimized angel, and the other is painted as this demonic monster. The abusive parent actively leverages and encourages this splitting to drive parental alienation, permanently embedding the child in a totally false, brainwashed reality.
Let's zoom out now for Section 4, the spiritual narcissist scaling the abuse to society.
Okay, so we've seen the family dynamic, but these exact same psychological tactics are used by gurus, life coaches, and certain societal leaders to build massive followings. Enter the spiritual narcissist. They claim some special connection to a higher authority, and they usually adopt one of three masks. You've got the victim, who uses virtue signaling and their own trauma to gather a little army of clones. Then there's the godlike figure, claiming exclusive arcane knowledge that you can only get through them. And finally, the healer, who fakes this deep empathy and promises to be the absolute sole savior for all your problems. But make no mistake, no matter the mask, the end goal is always absolute superiority and total control.
And here is exactly how they trap you. It always starts with the uninitiated novice. You get hooked by the promise of some exclusive wisdom you don't have yet. Then you're thrown into the endless pilgrimage. You're draining your bank account, giving up all your time, grinding through these arbitrary levels of progression. But here's the catch. It's an unattainable rainbow. They are never going to let you reach the finish line, because if you did, you'd be their equal. It's essentially an addiction. The cult provides what Dr. Vaknin calls an exoskeleton. It structures literally every waking moment of your life so you never actually have to, or even get to, think critically for yourself.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Breaking the Toxic Cycle, Radical Truth as the Antidote.
So how do we stop this? How do we break the matrix and protect the next generation from getting sucked into a family cult? Well, the antidote is radical truth. And the crucial takeaway here is this. When victims leave an abusive relationship, they often make a really dangerous mistake. In a vain effort to seem reasonable or avoid being accused of alienating the kids themselves, they try to present a balanced picture of the abusive ex. They end up whitewashing the abuse. Dr. Vaknin warns that this is incredibly dangerous. Kids have an absolute right not to be deluded. They have a fundamental right to the objective truth about why their family unit dissolved.
Protecting your kids means stepping up with proactive, honest communication. You have to explain the end of the relationship truthfully, without sugarcoating it. If psychological or verbal abuse was the cause, you need to bring that out into the open appropriately. But it's not just about explaining the past, it's about arming them for the future. Teach them how to spot the red flags of psychological abuse. Empower them to insist that their personal boundaries are respected by that abusive parent. And above all else, validate their absolute right to say no and just walk away from any compromising situation without feeling an ounce of guilt. Which leaves us with a pretty intense question to ponder today. Whether you're dealing with a toxic family member, an abusive partner, or some spiritual guru demanding your complete loyalty, will you remain a deeply manipulated internal object in someone else's private cult? Or will you take that terrifying, incredibly brave step to break contact, face reality, and reclaim your true self? The choice is entirely up to you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep your eyes open, and I'll see you next time.